conversations about race, gender, and sexuality, someone's going to be uncomfortable all the time. So what I'm asking you to do is to swallow your discomfort for a minute. Your therapist will tell you that's a bad idea, but go ahead and swallow your discomfort for just right now. We'll get through this together, and then, we can hug afterwards or something, I don't know. And talk with me for a minute about things that you see and things that you feel, and understand that you've been raised in a system. One of the things that I have been reading about recently that I think is important to express is that we all have prejudices, and we come to this thinking that racism and sexism and homophobia and transphobia they mean that the individual is a bad person and they're irredeemable, and that's why everyone said when someone calls someone a racist, it's this huge big deal. I'm not a racist, I have black friends, and everybody laughs. But you have to understand that every one of you is within a system that is racist and sexist and homophobic and transphobic, and your job in the act of preventing discrimination and promoting diversity is to recognize these things in yourself and in your environment and work very hard to accommodate them changing. So when someone says in a conversation like this, I hear what you're saying, but do you think maybe you're coming at this from a place of privilege, either because you are white or because you're a man or because you are straight or cis? Don't try and stop yourself from saying, oh, but I'm not like that, and stop with the focus on you and understand that this is the expression of the system within yourself. Okay, does everybody understand what I'm saying? All right, I have 3 examples from the recent news that have to do with race. And we're going to talk about those examples and how you feel they should have been handled. If you're comfortable. If you're not comfortable, you can. Our first example is we've had 2 governors in the last less than a year who have had yearbook photos or college situations from when they were younger come up where they participated in blackface. They were both white. One was a man, one was a woman. And their response has been to say, you know what, I don't really remember it happening, but it doesn't reflect who I am now, and to move on. What do you think the response to that should be? Anyone want to participate in this conversation? If you want names, one is our own illustrious Governor Caggie.
Oh, yeah.
And one is Ralph Northam from Virginia.
Caggie apologized and all that, but I don't abide by her apology for a minute, not a second.
Okay. Why do you think that why do you think that we're letting her get away with just saying she's sorry and that doesn't reflect how she feels now?
Because some people are stupid enough to buy it, to buy her apology. Some people are.
Anyone else have something to say? I'm feeling that.
Maybe, just like Trump, she probably has a lot of power. Maybe. I'm not sure. I don't know her that well, but...
There isn't a wrong answer here. So yes, throwing these things out is good.
It doesn't matter what they say. I mean, it's not going to change anything.
True. That's so true.
Why you can move forward and try to prove that it doesn't reflect who you are.
Does anyone have any opinions about what should happen in these cases? Do you think Caggie should be able to continue to be governor?
No.
Do you think that her apology is enough, or do you agree that she has to try and move forward and show that she's different?
She has to, perform some action to show that she's really sorry. I mean, she made it verbal. I mean, but, she just made it verbal and all that. I mean, I'm sorry, but I find that, so unbelievable.
Anyone have another?
I mean, for situations like these, there's never really been, there's no consequences that have been implemented over the many times that stuff like this has surfaced. So we're just accustomed to just like, oh, they said sorry. Well, they're in their position of power now, so we can't do anything about it.
Okay, there's a graduate student at UAB who is a member of, and I always get this wrong, Identity Europa, which is a white supremacist group. He assures the press that he has not had a single bias complaint in almost 7 years as a TA, and he works to minimize any bias via de-identification of student work. And he says he's not a white supremacist, but he believes white Americans need to be more vocal about their interests.
Their interest is on what?
He leaves it pretty vague.
Good question.
So, what should be the consequences for this as a teaching assistant, someone who's in charge of grading a diverse student population?
We need to be cool away from that.
All right, anyone else have any? This man still has his job.
Oh.
So they're not gonna just like invest, like, no, they don't feel like he should lose his.
They have said it's protected freedom of speech.
How?
That's what they say.
That's crazy. But it's freedom of speech,
If
but
it-
still at the same time, he's
True.
gonna look at names and assume this person is that color, so he's gonna maybe mark something on there. That's just crazy. No. We might
If it
change
was
my
the
brain.
color of a black African American taking him a spot, people would be like, oh, well, he feels this way, they should do this, oh, get him out of there now. And they take it, they look at it like this color, they're like, oh, this is perfectly fine. But if someone of the other color comes in, it's a problem.
And you are leading into, I'm sorry, did I cut you off?
I can sing this song.
Okay.
Would you like for me to sing it again? Would you like me to sing it?
If you'd like, yes, go ahead.
Oh, I hope that's where you're headed.
Go ahead, yeah, we are.
Oh, Jamie Riley.
Yeah.
The Dean of, and I want to get his title right, the Assistant Vice President and Dean of Students at UA. Did y'all read about this? Okay, Jamie Riley,
This
he,
was last week.
yeah,
This was last week, y'all, so.
Is that the
Yeah.
man that he had to resign?
yes. The tweets that he published were, I'm baffled about how the first thing white people say is that's not racist when they can't even experience racism. You have zero opinion. Which, if you define racism by sociology terms, he's correct, because white people are in power. And then he had the American flag represents a systemic history of racism for my people. Police are a part of that system. Is that hard to see the correlation? Now, he published these tweets 2 years ago and was well liked by the students and had been vetted by the university. And he lost his job. Do you want to know the major difference between him and Mr. Michael B. Williams, the UAB TA?
Please and thank you.
You're right.
So how do you feel that should have been handled?
They both should get treated the same way. Whether you look at race or not. Yeah.
I am baffled by how we come to different conclusions for different people based on the color of their skin. But I'm glad to see I've got people here who agree with me. This is refreshing and nice. We have to start changing the discussion. We all here seem to be of a mind. Part of me is very thankful about that, but it is never bad to express your opinion to someone who feels differently from you, unless it means physical harm. You know, don't punch a Nazi if they've got a gun pointed at you is probably a really good thing to keep in mind. But we have to quit looking at racism as individual intentional malintent. Yes, I believe that there are people who are racist because they are individually and intentionally full of malintent. But one of the things that was really hard for me to realize, I grew up in a community where there was a single black family, and we were all poor, and my parents definitely did not want me to go to college. So I looked around me and I saw that all of the female students, all the girls, were having the same struggles. They were fighting against their fathers to go to school and not just get married and have babies. But I never saw a difference between the single black woman that I went to school with and the rest of us, because it was such a small community. So when I got out into a wider community, I had to realize that not everyone has the same experiences that I do, and not everyone has the same privilege that I have. And that's racist. I behaved and believed in a racist way because of my socialization and my ignorance. And I like to say to my students, I'm not woke, I'm waking up. And it's a process that we all have to go through.
Right.
And those of us who are in positions of privilege and power need to recognize this and move forward. We've all been shaped by this system, and if we are quiet about it and we just kind of let things happily flow along, we're supporting the inequality. Now, because we have brains and we're psychological creatures, we all have ways to deflect our discomfort. So if you're in a situation where you're witnessing racism, sexism, or homophobia, or transphobia, and someone's trying to discuss it with you, if someone comes to you and says, hey, you know, as a queer person, or as a person of color, or as a trans person, this made me uncomfortable. When you respond to them, think about these 4 things. Are you changing the subject? This was really popular when Black Lives Matter started. You had a whole bunch of people going, well, all lives matter. And they were changing the subject. Are you using inappropriate humor? You may find that in your small social group, you will have a banter that includes humor, that everyone kind of understands as you just being humorous and dealing with outside stress by using humor. But in a larger group, a group of people you may not know so well, when someone says, hey, my preferred pronouns are she and her, do you go, or him and his and it and they and their? Do you use that humor to deflect things? When someone says Black Lives Matter, do you say, well, all black lives matter, they're great dogs? That's using humor to deflect. Do you get defensive or angry? Do you say something like, well, I have black friends? Do you act like you've been attacked? Do you, what did my first husband call it? Do you do emotional blackmail where you start to cry so that suddenly you have to be comforted and the person in the minority community is seen as the aggressor and not the victim in the situation? And thirdly, do you focus on the positive? Do you say, oh, well, yeah, you know, Kay Ivey had that blackface thing, but she's doing pre-K. Let's talk about what she's doing for pre-K. And those are the 4 things that in these situations, people in privilege tend to back off to in order to make themselves feel more comfortable. So that's my spiel. I'm a librarian, so I do have a reading list if any of you are interested that you can pick up.
So to add on to what Kelly was just talking about, we have to be careful about our personal biases and how we allow them to spill out into our everyday lives. And that's when we're at the grocery store, that's when we're at home, that's when we're at school. Here at Shelton State, I'm the chair of the diversity committee, and we have spoken and had much dialogue about how we want the climate to be here on campus. We don't want anyone from the LGBTQ plus community to feel that they are not welcomed. We don't want any person of color, and whatever color that is, to feel like they are not welcome. We are all here under the same roof trying to reach one goal, and that's to complete our education. But we need to be mindful of these types of things as we do that. So we're going to watch a short video, a lady named Melody Hobson, and she's going to share with us her story about colorism and racism and how it's affected her even in her professional life. Okay?
So in 2007, my friend Greg Ford called me running for U.S. Senate in Missouri. And he said, Melody, I desperately need some national press. Do you have any ideas? So I had an idea. I called a friend who was in New York at one of the most successful media companies in the world, and she said, why don't we host an editorial board lunch for Herald? You come with him. Harold and I arrive in New York. We are in our best suits. We look like shiny new pennies. And we get to the receptionist and we say, we're here for the lunch. She motions for us to follow her. We walk through a series of corridors, and all of a sudden we find ourselves in a stark room, at which point she looks at us and she says, "Where are your uniforms?" Just as this happens, my friend rushes in. The blood drains from her face. There are literally no words, right? And I look at her and I say, "Now, don't you think we need more than one black person in the US Senate?" Now, Harold and I, we still laugh about that story. And in many ways, the moment caught me off guard. But deep, deep down inside, I actually wasn't surprised. And I wasn't surprised because of something my mother taught me about 30 years before. You see, my mother was ruthlessly realistic. I remember one day coming home from a birthday party where I was the only black kid invited. And instead of asking me the normal motherly questions like, "Did you have fun?" or "How was the cake?" my mother looked at me and she said, "How did they treat you?" I was 7. I did not understand. I mean, why would anyone treat me differently? But she knew. And she looked me right in the eye and she said, "They will not always treat you well." Now, race is one of those topics in America that makes people extraordinarily uncomfortable. You bring it up at a dinner party or in a workplace environment, it is literally the conversational equivalent of touching the third rail. There is shock, followed by a long silence. And even coming here today, I told some friends and colleagues that I plan to talk about race, and they warned me. They told me, "Don't do it. There'd be huge risks in me talking about this topic. That people might think I'm a militant black woman and I would ruin my career." And I have to tell you, I actually for a moment was a bit afraid. Then I realized the first step to solving any problem is to not hide from it. And the first step to any form of action is awareness. And so I decided to actually talk about race. And I decided that if I came here and shared with you some of my experiences, then maybe we could all be a little less anxious and a little more bold in our conversations about race. Now, I know there are people out there who will say that the election of Barack Obama meant that it was the end of racial discrimination for all eternity, right? But I work in the investment business, and we have a saying: the numbers do not lie. And here, there are significant, quantifiable racial disparities that cannot be ignored in household wealth, household income, job opportunities, healthcare. One example from corporate America. Even though white men make up just 30% of the US population, they hold 70% of all corporate board seats. Of this Fortune 250, there are only 7 CEOs that are minorities. And of the thousands of publicly traded companies today, thousands, only 2 are chaired by black women. And you're looking at one of them, the same one who not too long ago was nearly mistaken for kitchen help. So that is a fact. Now, I have this thought experience that I play with myself, experiment. When I say, imagine if I walked you into a room and it was of a major corporation like ExxonMobil, and every single person around the boardroom were black, you would think that were weird. But if I walked you into a Fortune 500 company and everyone around the table is a white male, when will it be that we think that's weird too? And I know how we got here. I know how we got here. You know, there was institutionalized and one time legalized discrimination in our country. There's no question about it. But I still, as I sort of grapple with this issue, my mother's question hangs in the air for me. How did they treat you? No, I do not raise this issue to complain or in any way elicit any kind of sympathy. I have succeeded in my life beyond my wildest expectations. And I've been treated well by people of all races more often than I have not. I tell the uniform story because it happened. I cite those statistics around corporate board diversity because they are real. And I stand here today talking about this issue of racial discrimination because I believe it threatens to rob another generation of all the opportunities that all of us want for all of our children, no matter what their color or where they come from. And I think it also threatens to hold back businesses. You see, researchers have coined this term color blindness to describe a learned behavior where we pretend that we don't notice race. If you happen to be surrounded by a bunch of people who look like you, that's purely accidental. Now, color blindness, in my view, doesn't mean that there's no racial discrimination and there's fairness. It doesn't mean that at all. It doesn't ensure it. In my view, color blindness is very dangerous because it means we're ignoring the problem. There was a corporate study that said that instead of avoiding race, the really smart corporations actually deal with it head on. They actually recognize that embracing diversity means recognizing all races, including the majority one. But I'll be the first one to tell you, this subject matter can be hard, awkward, uncomfortable, but that's kind of the point. In the spirit of debunking racial stereotypes, the one that black people don't like to swim, I'm going to tell you how much I love to swim. I love to swim so much that as an adult, I swim with a coach. And one day my coach had me do a drill where I had to swim to one end of a 25-meter pool without taking a breath. And every single time I failed, I had to start over. And I failed a lot. By the end, I got it. When I got out of the pool, I was exasperated and tired and annoyed. And I said, why are we doing breath-holding exercises? And my coach looked at me and he said, Melody, that was not a breath-holding exercise. That drill was to make you comfortable being uncomfortable, because that's how most of us spend our days. If we can learn to deal with our discomfort and just relax into it, we'll have a better life. So I think it's time for us to be comfortable with the uncomfortable conversation about race. Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, male, female, all of us. If we truly believe in equal rights and equal opportunity in America, I think we have to have real conversations about this issue. We cannot afford to be colorblind. We have to be color brave. We have to be willing, as teachers and parents and entrepreneurs and scientists, we have to be willing to have proactive conversations about race with honesty and understanding and courage. Not because it's the right thing to do, but because it's the smart thing to do. Because our businesses and our products and our science, our research, all of that will be better with greater diversity. Now, my favorite example of color bravery is a guy named John Skipper. He runs ESPN. He's a North Carolina native, quintessential Southern gentleman, white. He joined ESPN, which already had a culture of inclusion and diversity, but he took it up a notch. He demanded that every open position have a diverse slate of candidates. Now, he says the senior people in the beginning bristled, and they would come to him and say, do you want me to hire the minority, or do you want me to hire the best person for the job? And Skipper says his answers were always the same, yes. And by saying yes to diversity, I honestly believe that ESPN is the most valuable cable franchise in the world. I think that's a part of the secret sauce. Now I can tell you in my own industry, at Ariel Investments, we actually view our diversity as a competitive advantage. And that advantage can extend way beyond business. There's a guy named Scott Page at the University of Michigan. He's the first person to develop a mathematical calculation for diversity. He says if you're trying to solve a really hard problem, really hard, that you should have a diverse group of people, including those with diverse intellects. The example that he gives is the smallpox epidemic. When it was ravaging Europe, they brought together all these scientists and they were stumped. And the beginnings of the cure to the disease came from the most unlikely source, a dairy farmer. A dairy farmer who noticed that the milkmaids were not getting smallpox. And the smallpox vaccination is bovine-based because of that dairy farmer. Now I'm sure you're sitting here and you're saying, I don't run a cable company, I don't run an investment firm, I am not a dairy farmer, what can I do? And I'm telling you, you can be color brave. If you're a part of a hiring process or an admissions process, you can be color brave. If you are trying to solve a really hard problem, you can speak up and be color brave. Now, I know people will say, but that doesn't add up to a lot, but I'm actually asking you to do something really simple. Observe your environment. At work, at school, at home. I'm asking you to look at the people around you purposefully and intentionally. Invite people into your life who don't look like you, don't think like you, don't act like you, don't come from where you come from. And you might find that they will challenge your assumptions and make you grow as a person. You might get powerful new insights from these individuals. Or, like my husband who happens to be white, you might learn that black people, men, women, children, we use body lotion every single day. Now, I also think that this is very important so that the next generation really understands that this progress will help them because they're expecting us to be great role models. And I told you my mother, she was ruthlessly realistic. She was an unbelievable role model. She was the kind of person who got to lead the way she was because she was a single mom with 6 kids in Chicago. She was in the real estate business where she worked extraordinarily hard, but oftentimes had a hard time making ends meet. And that meant sometimes we got our phone disconnected or our lights turned off or we got evicted. And we got evicted, sometimes we lived in these small apartments that she owned, sometimes in only 1 or 2 rooms because they weren't completed. And we would heat our bath water on hot plates. But she never gave up hope, ever. And she never allowed us to give up hope either. This brutal pragmatism that she had, I mean, I was 4 and she told me, "Mommy is Santa." She was this brutal pragmatism. She taught me so many lessons, but the most important lesson was that every single day she told me, "Melody, you can be anything, anything." And because of those words, I would wake up at the crack of dawn, and because of those words, I would love school more than anything, and because of those words, when I was on a bus going to school, I dreamed the biggest dreams. And it's because of those words that I stand here right now, full of passion, asking you to be brave for the kids who are dreaming those dreams today. You see, I want them to look at a CEO on television and say, "I can be like her," or "He looks like me." And I want them to know that anything is possible, that they can achieve the highest level that they ever imagined, that they will be welcome in any corporate boardroom or they can lead any company. You see this idea of being the land of the free and the home of the brave? It's woven into the fabric of America. America, when we have a challenge, we take it head on. We don't shrink away from it. We take a stand. We show courage. So right now what I'm asking you to do, I'm asking you to show courage. I'm asking you to be bold. As business leaders, I'm asking you not to leave anything on the table. As citizens, I'm asking you not to leave any child behind. I'm asking you not to be colorblind, but to be color brave, so that every child knows that their future matters and their dreams are possible. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Miss Melody Hobson, I love her story. So regardless to what challenges she's faced in corporate America, it did not deter her. I mean, she's running a company and she's one of the only 2 black women doing so. And so we applaud her, but I'm concerned because we see students here every day, all day, and I'm wondering who's going to be the next woman to run the next company beside her? Who's going to be brave? Who's going to step up and step out of their comfort zone? So I know these topics makes us feel a little bit uncomfortable, but it's a necessary evil. I think that these are conversations that have to be had. When she was talking, I wrote down a few notes. We have to commit to be intentional with our actions to embrace diversity, inclusion, and equity. And so when we find that somebody is not being treated right, do we just stand by and say nothing, or do we say something? You know, those are questions that we need to ask ourselves. Are we going to be behind the scenes disagreeing, or are we going to step up sometimes and say that we disagree? What are we going to do? Are we going to continue to juggle being colorblind or color brave? Discrimination blind or discrimination brave? Will we be culturally blind or culturally brave? Because sometimes the issue is not necessarily a gender or race issue. It's a cultural barrier. We all grew up probably in different types of neighborhoods, but I may look at you and think that you came from one place and you came from somewhere else. Nobody thought that I would be doing what I'm doing right now. I grew up in the poorest county in the state. There was no funding for anything. There's still people that live in my county that don't even have running water. That's just the truth of the matter, but you can't look at me and tell that. We can't look at a person and tell where they come from or what their experiences are. And so the list goes on and on, but we are here today to encourage you to be more aware. Be more aware of yourself. Be more aware of your personal biases. Be more aware of your personal thoughts and feelings about things. And let's not sweep it under the rug and pretend like it's not there, but we really want to address that. We want to be brave enough to take a stand first with ourselves, and then we can definitely help someone else. So we're going to take a minute to do a quick activity. Does everybody have something to write with? Can you pass that around for me?
I'm sorry, my motor skills are not what they need to be.
Make sure that everybody got a pen?
So everyone has gotten a blank sheet of paper, right? And in life we say that when we're born we get a blank sheet. That's not necessarily the case. I can think of a million things that were on my sheet when I was born that I had to kind of dig through in order to be successful in my life. But I want you to look at your paper, and I want you to write down a time when you had to be color brave, discrimination brave, culturally brave. Or, if you can't think of that, you tell me, based off of what you heard today, times when you've been culturally blind, discrimination blind, color blind. One example. Let's just take a couple of minutes to do that. Just one. Just
I
one.
said, no, she faked.
Just one. Just one.
And we're not gonna make you share these if you're not
You're not
comfortable sharing.
comfortable. Yes, if you're not comfortable, we're not going to.
I should.
But we are going to have some dialogue real quick before we leave here at 2:30.
Did you write that? I ain't had these in a while.
Wanna go buy something?
I hope this keep going on
Yes.
So the second thing you wanted to start was,
Just one example of either colorblind or color brave, culturally blind or culturally brave, or discrimination blind or brave. Just one example of one of those.
so this one too. And then I don't have to write anything else.
If you don't want to, that's up to you.
I didn't know nothing about it.
Wrestling.
Sure.
They didn't check.
Just one.
And I said,
while others are wrapping up, I'm going to share one that comes to mind. So a couple of years ago, my son was playing football, and this was during the time when Colin Kaepernick was taking a knee before he got fired from the NFL. And my son felt very strongly about what Kaepernick was doing. And so when it was time for the game and time for the national anthem to be played, he took a knee on the field. Now, it didn't help that we were not at home. We were not at a home game. We were at a local school, and let's just say flags are all around. So people were very, very upset. Now, you know, in their defense, I'm pretty sure that offended them. And in his defense, I'm pretty sure that he didn't think about all of that. He was just standing up for what he believed in. The following week, we had a home game. And so at the home game, he did the same thing. Now, there's more than one captain, and he was sitting in the middle. So there's one on this side and one on this side, and saying, get up, don't do that, don't do that. And the other one was on this side, don't do that, don't embarrass us like that, stand up, stand up, stand up. And he was adamant he would not move. And so he got, fussed at by many people. Well, somebody got so upset until they had to be escorted out the stadium and could no longer attend football games anymore. And so, I was proud of my son for standing up for what he believed in, regardless to if others agreed with him or not. However, from my mother's perspective, it was scary. It was scary. There were some threats and some other things, and he was just a child. And so, there were some things posted on social media about it or whatever, but I took the role as, we're adults. Everybody's not going to be like us. And you can't change other people. You can't change how they feel. We have to sometimes look outside of ourselves and see that people have experienced things, and some things, some climates affect people differently than others, right? And so we just need to embrace differences, period. It doesn't matter whether we agree or not. Sometimes we just need to agree to disagree and move on peaceably. And so that's one thing that comes to mind when I think of being color brave. Although his friends, some friends agreed with him, they would rather stay colorblind. They didn't want to say anything because they didn't want to be looked at in a negative way. Okay? Would anybody else like to share what they wrote?
Oh, I will.
Go right ahead.
I'm still writing,
But that's fine. Go right ahead.
So my brother, he's married to a white lady, and they've been together for years, and they have a child together. So they got married, and when we went to the wedding, people were standing in line, every race, all that. There were two older white ladies in front of me, and the line had moved. And so they were standing there talking, and I was like, excuse me, are y'all gonna move? Are y'all gonna move up? They looked at me and turned back around. All I did was just went right in front of them, and I just continued on my day, even though I was trying to hold my peace because it was my brother's wedding, but that really, it did something to me.
It offended you.
Yes.
It offended you.
Yes.
So what did it make you feel at that time? What made you upset in how they responded to you?
It made me angry because outside of the wedding, there was a little sign. It was like, we're coming together as one. So I'm pretty sure they saw that sign, but really, in reality, it probably was a race thing. So it didn't really matter anymore. But at the end of the day, they're just gonna have to eventually get used to it.
I hear that. Anyone else?
Can I give an example?
Sure.
This has been like several years ago before I worked at Shelton. I was working somewhere else.
And where I worked at, I was the only black female that worked doing what I was doing. I was the only one. So I've always been used to being the only black or the only black, well, usually the only black is where I'm from. When I graduated high school, I was one of 5 black people in my high school class. So I was always, you know, just used to Monica. My mama couldn't understand how comfortable I was. Like, you okay? Like, I'm like, yeah, I mean, it was just like we were family. Like, it was just the norm for me. So anyway, where I worked at before, I was the only black female, and anytime I had trainings or anything, I would usually be like the only black person, or maybe 1 or 2 or something like that. But anyway, at this time I was over a program, and the people that I was over, they were older people, like grandma age, you know, so they were older than me, and they were all white. So I came in, I was over them, I had to train them and all of that. So, like, if they had any problems, if they couldn't resolve it, they have to come to me because I was, like, the supervisor. So, this particular time, someone got upset at one of them, and then, because they were telling them the rules, no, you can't do this, and then they said, well, we want to talk to your supervisor. So, I came over there and was like, okay, hi, I'm LaMonica, and they called and said you were having an issue. Well, how did you get that? How did you get this job? I used to get that question asked all the time. How did I get this job? How are you working here? How did you get this job? But they never asked anybody else. So I don't know. I'm sure most of it was because I was black, and a lot of it was because I was female. Because it was at that time 1 white lady, and I was the black lady, the only black person, and the only black female. So I got that question all the time. But when they asked the question, I answered. I said, well, the first thing I did is I went to college. I wanted to make sure that I have a degree. And after that, I applied, and I told them, I went to this university, I did this and that, and that's how I got the job. And they were like, looking at me all crazy. But I was faced with that a lot of times working.
But I think that oftentimes when we're asked questions, we have to wonder, we have to ask ourselves, are we getting angry? Because one of the things that was shared earlier, are you getting angry with your response? Because you could have responded in such a way that it would have made you not look good in front of those who reported to you, or not made your company look good. And so just like Melody, she didn't act ugly when she was referred to as the kitchen help. She didn't address it ugly. I think it's our response oftentimes. This generation oftentimes doesn't have the right response, and so we're either super quiet, or we are very, very aggressive. And so the response oftentimes can be the difference in whether or not someone receives you. Sometimes I get the question from fellow coworkers, well, can you help me to understand something, just because they don't understand a certain cultural aspect. And sometimes I can help them, sometimes I don't, because even though I'm black, I still may not understand. That may not be my culture. Does that make sense? Go right ahead.
So I was faced with the attitude problem at work. Well, I guess I had a hard time trying to change it from work to school to home. So the situation occurred last week, and I'm probably one of 3 of the youngest people that work there. I'm surrounded by both black women and white women. And so when I work with my residents, they're like, oh, well, how do you do this? How did you get this job? How did you do this? And I'm just like, well, one, I had to think before I spoke, try to be professionally, And so I explained to her, I was like, well, I applied, I did this, I'm in school, so I'm working my way up. And I said it nice towards her. Mm-hmm. And when I walked out the room, she spoke to the other resident, and she said, well, I know how she acts and how a situation occurred, and that's not her. She's pretending. And I walked back in the room. I closed the door.
That's the problem.
So I ain't do anything. I didn't do anything. I I just explained to her when I closed the door. I said, look, now I'm being professional as possible. This is my job. Now I'm coming to you as a person like you were outside of this facility. Now, I know you may not like me, but professional as possible. I got this job, respect that. Now if you need any help with anything, let me know and I will be glad to help you. But don't come off to me as rude and I won't come off to you as rude and we won't have any problems. And this morning, she called me and she was like, I want to apologize to you. And I said, I accept your apology. We should not have any more problems. And my boss called me and she was like, I'm glad that you handled the situation. Next time, come to me about it and we'll take care of it. And she will be removed from the facility. And I said, thank you very much. If there's anything else I need to do, let me know. So basically I got this little card. So basically they grade my attitude at work. So I'm known for being quiet, but like when something go, you know, I gotta step in, I'll step in, like try to, cause I got a bad attitude, I really do.
We're gonna help you work on that.
Yeah, I've taken classes, I worked on it.
We're gonna help you work on that. And that's the thing, us being self-aware. We can be in denial all day. The whole bit of, well, you're racist. No, I'm not, because I have black friends, or I have white friends, or Isabel's my best friend, and she's Hispanic. You know, we kind of stop making excuses for ourselves and be self-aware. But we gotta help you. You stay after. We gotta talk to you.
I've always taught myself because, like, I've always been like, okay, well, I know I'm gonna go here. I know I gotta act this way. I know I gotta wear this. I know I gotta speak like this. I know how to act. And,
but y'all hear what she's saying?
Yeah,
Do y'all hear what she's saying? It's still all those, she's having to change who she is depending on who she's around to make them feel comfortable, which causes the attitude, which causes the tension to continue to arise, which causes her to potentially may lose her job.
See,
Is that right? No. Is that right? I want to hear from the rest of y'all. Y'all been quiet over here in this corner. What do y'all think?
What was that again?
You know, is that right? Is the climate such in this building, in our workplaces, in the grocery store, in this country, that we have to change who we are just so Eric can be comfortable, just so you can be comfortable? I can't act the way I want to act or be who I really am because you're not going to like that. What about people in the LGBTQ plus community? What do y'all think they feel? Well, I gotta, I was born a man, so I gotta put a suit and tie on, and because I'm in the company of certain people and act a certain way with them, although that's not really who I am. Are we telling people to really be who they are and be comfortable in their own skin? Or are we telling people to continue to live a lie so that other people can be comfortable? What are we doing?
We're probably telling more people to live a lie than we are, telling them, to feel comfortable in their own skin.
That's right, we probably are. So in thinking about all these things, and we're talking about preventing discrimination and promoting diversity, can you see where maybe we need to do a little bit more work?
Yes.
I think we do.
Speak up. When you see someone behaving in a way that exhibits that they've been in a racist system, when you see them saying something that defames another person or makes someone in a minority uncomfortable, if you hear them use a slur, racial or sexual or whatever, if they come out with something like, well, women aren't normally like that. The hard part is, as a bystander, to say, whoa, hey, that's really inappropriate. Because the person who is being discriminated against or discriminated towards is not in a position of power. And you as an outsider are.
Mm-hmm. When you're sitting in class and you see somebody that's kind of sitting off to themselves and they may be feeling like they don't fit in or they don't belong, are you going to group up with your group because that's where you feel comfortable and continue to allow that person to be the outcast? Or are you going to get beyond yourself and go and make everybody feel included? Because at the end of the day, we here at Shelton State want to promote diversity, inclusion, and equity with everybody. With everybody. So I just want you to think about that. Spread the word to your friends. These student success seminars are for us not to just talk about schoolwork and those types of things, but we want you to be culturally ready. We want you to be workplace ready. You know, those of you who are going to work at these different plants like Mercedes, there's all kinds of people from all walks of life, all different kinds of languages. I was in the grocery store the other day and there was this group of guys and they were speaking German. It just baffled me. I didn't know. Right. See there? See, and I'm not around that often, so that kind of shocked me. And I asked one of them, what language is that you're speaking? And he was happy to say. I didn't just stand there and stare at him and make him feel uncomfortable. I asked because we're all human, right?
Right.
Okay, so we can just have a conversation. Now, let's talk about the flip side. Everybody's not going to receive you. Right?
Right.
Everybody you can't have a conversation with, everybody you can't, relate to or whatever. You can't force your beliefs on them and vice versa. So pick your battles. I think this young man, last time we met, talked about how sometimes, it's difficult to make that stand in front of people because of the retaliation of others. And so we understand that courage has to be built up, but I feel like if you continue to study in this area, continue to make yourself aware of things that are going on, that you'll be more courageous and able to promote diversity and prevent discrimination, not just amongst others, but within yourself. Any questions? Any comments, any thoughts, any criticisms?
I don't have a criticism, but I do want to share just a little insight as it relates to what we're trying to promote here is the prevent discrimination and diversity. And what was said out there on the video, I think one thing that I think really stood out to me and resonated with me, connected with me, is the fact that you gotta dream big.
Yeah.
And not allow people or circumstances to dictate who you are. I can even use an example as myself and being in a role as a predominantly dominated female role, but working in the office as a man, especially in the South, is not really common.
That's true.
I served 8 years in the military and I had certain skill sets while I was in the military, but when I got out the military and tried to put those skill sets in motion, a lot of business and industries would not accept my skill sets that I learned in the military because it wasn't a traditional role for a man.
Right.
Because in my military role, I had to learn how to type 60 words a minute. But how many men you knew back in the 90s typed 60 words a minute?
Right. They don't talk.
And when, but back then, you had to pass a typing test to get a job or have the skill set. And when you apply for a job, they look at your resume and they see that you type 60 words a minute. Like, okay. But that didn't stop me from letting people understand, regardless of who I was or what I was, I had the skill set.
Right.
And I wasn't going to stop because you saw in a difference. And I think that's what we sometimes do when people see us with an indifference or a different opinion, is we tend to hide.
Right.
But be who you are. And I think the whole thing is about accepting everybody, period. I mean, we get to that point. And I'm picking on the South because you see it more in the South than you anywhere else.
Yes, you do.
You don't have, I can say it for myself because I'm from Michigan. We didn't have race issues in Michigan. The only thing we worried about in Michigan was staying alive. We wasn't so much worried about color. Only thing we saw was bullets and trying to hide from those things. So racism and that kind of atmosphere really wasn't promoted because we all was in a situation and all we was just trying to do was survive.
Right.
I remember very, and I'm gonna be done here. When I moved down here in the 5th grade, there was 3 white Erics in the classroom. I was the 4th, so I was new. So they didn't call me by my first name; they called me by my last name. And I was like, "That's a way to welcome me to the South." This is Eric. This is Eric. This is Eric. We're not gonna call you Eric. We're just gonna call you by your last name. You know, I was like, "Oh, good." Then I got sent to the principal's office because I didn't say yes, ma'am, to the principal.
That's a cultural thing.
I was like,
Right.
where I'm from, we didn't say that.
Ma'ams and
The only person we
sirs.
said yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am to was our parents and grandparents.
Right.
Not just to everybody, but down here in the South, they expected you to say yes, ma'am to everybody, even if you don't know who you was. I'm like, you sent me to the principal office because I didn't say yes, ma'am. Well, I guess I'll stay here a while.
Well, you were northern, and so you were uppity and disrespectful, you know, and all those things that the southern belles said about the northern children. The
Exactly.
people in the north would send their children to the south to be raised because the north didn't know how to raise their children. There's so many different cultural aspects of it all, but
But was the acceptance?
right,
I was being punished for
right,
something I didn't even know.
right, and
And-
something that was outside of your control.
And that's what happens in our society where we tend to punish people
Right.
because of what we don't know.
Right. All right, folks, we're out of time. It's 2:30. We can keep the conversation going on and on. And I'm challenging you to keep the conversation going amongst your friends, at home, within yourselves. Let us work to promote diversity, inclusion, and equity here on campus and in our lives, and to prevent discrimination of any kind. Thanks for joining us and have a good day.
Okay, make sure you've signed in on the sign-in sheet and make sure you have filled out your evaluation. There is not a space for your email address on the evaluation, but if you will put an email address, whatever email you're going to check, because that's how I'm going to notify you if you won the book award, and your name will also be in next Monday's student e-newsletter.